Welcome to Faith for the Apocalypse. My name is Nick, and this channel is a space for us to talk about faith, politics, and whatever else we want. Now, this morning, Trump was sworn in for his second presidency, and I'm not sure I can even begin to unpack all of the complicated feelings that I have and that I'm sure you have as well. But I do have a kind of short vocabulary lesson that I think is going to be really important for us today and as we move forward, kind of in anticipation of what might occur during Trump's presidency. Now, during the election season, you might have seen the same thing that I did, that folks kind of took this both sidesism place when we talk about the political perspectives that are being shown by our two candidates, right? Well, I know the news says that the left is socialist and the right is fascist, but that's all just rhetoric. And when reality, everyone's kind of safely in this middle space. And now I'm wondering if that's actually true. Because you see, words have just absolutely immense power, especially in resistance movements. Words are the ways that we communicate ideas, the way we critique existing systems, the way we organize and connect with others, the way we begin to communicate and dream about the future that we hope to create. Throughout history, one of the ways that systems of oppression, systems of power, systems of authority have controlled and squashed dissent is by controlling, muddling, or confusing the language that people may use. This makes me think of the book Animal Farm and the pigs double speak, right? The pigs change the way that language works. They eliminate words from the vocabulary. So then the other barnyard animals don't kind of have an opportunity to identify and resist the changes that are happening around them. We are at risk of being those animals on the farm who are losing our rhetorical power to talk about our systems and to provide critique. So, today, on the day that Trump becomes president again, I want to pause and take a minute for a vocabulary lesson to talk about two words that are vitally important for us to be sure we are 100% crystal clear on their definitions. So, let's start with authoritarianism. Now, authoritarianism is a political system that is characterized by the rejection of political plurality in favor of a centralized leader who typically supports a certain political status quo. Authoritarian regimes see reduction in democracy, separation of power, civil liberties, and the rule of law. But what does an authoritarian regime actually look like, or what does it do? Well, a 1964 essay, An Authoritarian Regime, Spain, examines the authoritarian regime in Spain in order to give us four kind of qualities that these regimes have. So the first is that limitation of political pluralism, which we mentioned. This is achieved by constraining the legislature, limiting political parties, and eliminating the voice of special interest groups that would otherwise have influence and power within political systems. The second kind of quality of authoritarianism is that political legitimacy is based on emotional appeals and the idea that the regime is the only way to resist some kind of existential, easily identifiable threat, right? In past regimes, that might be underdevelopment, it might be economic lagging, it might be insurgency from rebellious groups. But in our kind of current context, we can see how progressive social ideas have become this easily identifiable threat that the regime must defend against. The third quality that we have of authoritarian regimes is minimal political mobilization and the suppression of anti regime activities. This is something that we're really kind of concerned about moving forward as the Trump campaign. Trump himself has promised that he is going to go after his political enemies. We're really concerned about what this looks like moving forward. And then finally, authoritarian regimes are characterized by an ill defined executive power, which is often vague and shifting and allows for a kind of expansion of executive power and collecting of more control across the political system. So these are definitely some qualities that we can recognize within the Trump administration and Trump's language. But what kind of does this mean for our political system moving forward, for what's going to happen in the future? Well, Project Democracy has a really helpful resource called the Authoritarian Playbook. There is a link in the description below, so you can check that out. But they talk about kind of these 6 steps, these 6 activities that authoritarians will use. And I think these are things that we should be aware of as we are starting out the next Trump presidency. So, what does the playbook say? Well, the 6 things that we need to watch out for from our authoritarian regimes are politicizing independent institutions. All democracies have functions that are supposed to be kind of independent from political actions and political parties, right? From law enforcement to banking, the IRS, the justice system, all of these things are supposed to be kind of functioning outside of our political party system. But authoritarians attack and seek to kind of capture those institutions and bring them under their power and under their influence. The second thing authoritarian regimes do is spread disinformation, right? Most politicians lie at some level, but authoritarianisms kind of propagate falsehoods, amplify them all over the place without much care and a lot of efficiency. This is something we have definitely seen from the far right. The third is aggrandizing of executive power, right? Authoritarian projects cannot succeed without cooperation and acquiescence from these other governmental areas, such as the legislatures, the courts, and other forms of dissent that would serve as checks and balances. This is definitely something that we've seen and been concerned about as the court system has kind of protected Trump and his, I'll call it, bad behavior, for lack of better terms. The fifth thing authoritarian regimes will do is scapegoat vulnerable communities, right? So they take a vulnerable group intentionally, they sow division, they say, these people are a threat, these people are things you need to be worried about, you need to be upset about. We see this in our current context with language around migrants, non-documented workers, trans people, a variety of vulnerable and marginalized communities. Finally, authoritarians stoke violence, either implicitly or explicitly. They sow the seeds that will lead to violence and feelings of insecurity and fear that might cause people to react. This is definitely something we saw on January 6th, and many of us in marginalized communities are concerned about moving forward. So, after looking at the 4 qualities and the 6 actions of authoritarians, I think we can pretty much agree that Trump and his administration are indeed authoritarian. So, I think we've established that the incoming regime leans towards authoritarianism, but what about fascism? So, fascism is defined as a populist political philosophy, movement, or regime that exalts nation and often race over the individual. It is associated with a centralized authority, usually headed by a dictator, and is characterized by economic and social regimentation and by the forcible suppression of opposition. There are 14 steps to fascism. Now, I know 14 is a lot, so I just want us to look at them really quickly and decide if maybe some of these things are happening or have happened. So, number 1, a cult of tradition and a return to the old ways, like making America great again. Number 2, the rejection of modernism and evidence based rationality, like rejecting medical advice during COVID. Number 3, the cult of action for action's sake or pointless power posturing, like bringing back TikTok when it never actually was banned or went anywhere in a meaningful way. Number 4, non analytical criticism, moving away from talking about ideals and using bullying terms, like Trump calling his opponents stupid, nasty, or low IQ. Number 5, a fear of difference and enforced sameness amongst the population. Number 6, the appeal to a frustrated middle class. This is definitely something we saw during the campaigning season. Number 7, the obsession with plot that something shadowy is happening that we need to be protected against, like the idea of a deep state. Number 9, anti-elitism, especially around educated authorities or other experts. This is definitely something that we've seen from Trump and his supporters. 9, the idea that pacifism or working together or getting along is somehow trafficking with the enemy because we are at war. This is something we've seen a little bit of, but I think we need to be really wary of as we move into the future. 10, contempt for the weak, because real Americans are strong. We can see this in the way that Trump has mocked those with disabilities. 11, the cult of heroism or the idea of making our leader out to be a hero, even if they maybe haven't. This idea that they are surviving from danger. We can see this in how Trump responded to an assassination attempt that hurt his ear. 12, machismo, or the disdain for women and other gender minorities. I don't think I need to explain how the Trump administration has participated in that. 13, selective populism. The voice of the people is actually one limited segment of population that has been assumed to be universalized. And then 14, the use of newspeak or ambiguous or euphemistic language to talk about what's really going on. I think that it is important for us to know what authoritarianism is and what fascism is as we move forward into the future. We know that our current administration is leaning in these directions, and it is up to us to be vigilant and to continue our resistance against those developments. I don't have answers for how we can do that today, but I hope that you will continue to follow the channel and sign up for the Daily Devo as we continue to walk through this quagmire together and figure out the best way that we can promote mercy, justice, and love in the world around us. Thank you so much for being here. If you liked this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, all of those things, and I will see you again soon.